Hello and welcome to the Development Space podcast. I am your host, Sydney Nelson. On this episode, Rocket City, the nation's development path explained, we will be discussing oil and gas production and its impact on development, key and emerging sectors, and finally, what you could do to benefit from the nation's development. To dissect this conversation, I am joined by honored guest, Professor Sydney Armstrong. Professor Armstrong is a lecturer at the University of Guyana, attached to the Department of Economics. Professor Armstrong, welcome to the Development Space.
Yeah, thanks for having me here, Mr. Nelson. It's an honor to be a part of this conversation, basically contributing to the development discourse and bringing it all together in how it is linked to Guyana and where we are and where we're heading.
Excellent. So tell us a bit about yourself.
So my name is Sydney Armstrong. I'm a lecturer, like you've mentioned, in the Department of Economics. I've been at the university for nearly a decade now, since 2012 full-time. I hold a master's degree in development economics from the University of Queensland in Australia. I have a bachelor's in economics from the University of Guyana and a diploma in public management. I'm currently at the final phase of my PhD, which is at the University, Arizona State University. The program is Innovation in Global Development. So I am very much connected with the development discourse. My dissertation for my PhD surrounds social inequality and sustainable development. And as we explore this conversation here today, you'll hear me make reference to some of the things that I've found as I explored my dissertation. But apart from the professional life, I'm a very humble individual. Come from a family of three. I'm the youngest. Have a passion for cricket and athletics, traveling. So I'm very approachable. If you see me, you want to say hi, I'm very approachable.
Awesome. So let's start this discussion by focusing on oil and gas production. Right. It is no secret that Guyana has some of the best core and natural gas deposits. And large corporations and a number of smaller corporations, they are coming to Guyana to set up shop.
Right.
What does this mean for economic development? What is the economic impact of this?
So when we talk about economic development or development as a whole, I oftentimes tell people that our path to development is never a cheap path. It's a very expensive path. And this oil and gas sector that we have, we've been exploring and has been growing over the years, is our path to achieve our development agenda. When we take a look at where the sector is currently, beginning first production in January 2020, today there's a total of about 11 billion plus barrel reserved. Production has increased from 102,000 barrels per day to getting somewhere to 300,000 barrels per day. It has been estimated, according to ExxonMobil and its partners, that by 2025, with the coming on stream, you have the Liza 2, you have the Payara and the Yellowtail. That production should reach somewhere about 720,000 barrels by 2024, 2025. And then a little beyond that, with all going well, we should reach about 1 million barrels per day. So you can think about the amount of money or revenue that will be generated from that sector. Mm-hmm. And this is just from the oil. We can talk about recent CGX discovery. That is the Guyana-Suriname Shield. They have discovered commercial quantities also. So this is further adds to the prospect of what lies in store for us. But the important thing is that how we manage this sector is critical for us really pursuing the areas that we're actually strong in or we're good at. And these are the other sectors that we will explore as we go ahead. But the oil and gas sector, as it is, it has the potential to take us where we want to be.
So tell me, you mentioned Guyana having the potential of producing 1 million barrels
Yes.
of crude.
Yes.
And of course, we mentioned the natural gas finds with
Right.
CGX.
Right.
From a micro and even a macroeconomic standpoint, what does this look like? What are the implications?
So, again, one of the things that I would tell persons that when we're talking about the oil and gas sector, we really got to go back to the contracts that we sign with these companies. And if you go back to the production sharing agreement that we have with Exxon, the breakdown is, I think as it is, 75% of production goes as cost recovery, and then you have the other 25 being split 50-50, which is 12.5 and 12.5. And then in addition to our 12.5 that we receive, the company pays us 2% royalty on every oil that they sell. So it's about 14.5%. Now, this 14.5% largely depends on the oil price. So if oil price is booming, $100 per barrel, then that's significant amount of money coming in. But oil as a commodity is one of the most volatile commodity you can think about. So its price fluctuates tremendously. And so sometimes it can get as low as, I think in 2020, about $42 per barrel. So if you project on 100 and it dips to 42, there's a massive loss in revenue calculated in. So we have to temper how we discuss the earnings generated from the oil and gas sector. But with that said, the oil and gas sector is an addition to what we already have.
Correct.
So the revenues that we collect from there can do tremendous amount of things. I think in terms of how the sector will benefit us as a nation, we have to look at how it connects with the other sectors. And this is one of the things that I would mention to persons, especially trying to get into the oil and gas sector, that it is not really a labor-intensive sector. It's more capital-intensive. So it's not going to collect a whole lot of labor. But the good thing is what comes out from the oil and gas sector feeds into other sector, which can create significant amount of jobs and employment. For example, the energy sector is a direct spin-off from the oil and gas. So the energy sector is also linked to manufacturing. So if we're able to build up our energy sector, and you'll hear me talk more about this as we go ahead, we can talk about making things in Guyana. And that manufacturing aspect definitely will create a whole lot of jobs. Put money in people's pocket, create decent work, and then also expand our overall aggregates, the GDP and the other things. But it largely depends on, again, how we manage what we gain from that sector. And one of the things I'm hoping, and we'll explore this, is the idea of how we distribute the wealth. Because it is one thing to have the wealth. The other thing is the distribution.
You mentioned some very important points. And in fact, I want us to explore what are some of the emerging industries and what are some of the industries that are existing but are going to be amplified now that Guyana is beefed up with oil and gas production.
So in terms of emerging sector, I think the manufacturing sector would be the one to focus on. When you look at most countries that we consider to be developed, they would have passed through a phase which we call structural transformation, in which traditionally they started off with their agriculture sector, they moved into their manufacturing sector by innovation and reducing their energy bill and so forth. And then eventually, as the manufacturing sector grew, they moved into their service sector. But if you look at Guyana's path towards where we are, our manufacturing sector at no point in our history was the largest sector. So what this means, therefore, is that we have to revisit our manufacturing sector. So the emerging sector from the oil and gas, connecting with the oil and gas as a result of reducing the energy bill, is manufacturing. You'll see a whole, with a reduction in the energy bill, you'd find many international companies will begin to set up shop here. This means more job, it means more money, it means more foreign exchange, because we can talk about exportation. Obviously, we have a small population, 750, so our manufacturing has to cater for the global community. And so I would talk about the manufacturing sector. Apart from the other sectors that are going to play an integral role with really capitalizing on the oil and gas sector, definitely the agriculture sector. So when we talk about food security, it's something that we have to focus on. Then there's other, I probably want to make this argument that we don't forget the importance of other sectors. So there are other mining, like for example, gold. We have timber, we have fresh water, housing sector, construction, transportation. These are other sectors that if we're able to direct the right amount of resources, they can help us move our developmental efforts quickly. As you can see, over the last couple of years, a lot of efforts have been placed in towards construction. So you've seen we have the East Bank, East Coast connection through Mandela Avenue, Eccles, and then going on all the way to Diamond. And that is just one big project. We talk about the Demoir Harbor Bridge, another big project in terms of transport and road infrastructure. So these are other sectors that one needs to look out for. We can talk about its connection to jobs again. Mm-hmm. So if you are considering which sector that you can capitalize on, I would definitely say construction or transportation. I would say agriculture, the energy sector. And one of the things I'm hoping, especially with the energy sector, that we can start to talk more about, we have the conversation, but more about energy transition, which is to move away from the fossil fuel to more sustainable, clean energy, wind and hydro and solar. We have these conversations, but we need to move aggressively on them.
That is certainly a topic that I would love to have you back on the platform to explore. But with reference to what you mentioned in terms of these emerging sectors, you mentioned manufacturing, you mentioned construction. Tell us, in your estimation, what does these sectors look like in 5 years and 10 years respectively? But also, what does the local economy look like at 5 years and 10 years out?
Right. So with the manufacturing sector, as I've mentioned, largely depends on us being able to reduce our energy bill. And I think it is in budget 2023, the government had budgeted some 43 billion for the gas to shore project. Mm-hmm. That gas to shore project, if we're able to achieve it in the near future, the next 1 year, 2 years or so, everything in place and it's up and running, you're talking about an additional, I think, 300 megawatts of power. Energy bill is expected to reduce significantly. That means, therefore, that in terms of our competitive edge as a nation, we become right up there. This would be very attractive to large industries. I can see possibly, not in 10 years, but longer, possibly major manufacturing car dealers coming down here. Because of the potential that we have and the resources that we have access to. One of the things that I'm noticing, however, is a lot of tourism. You notice these hotels being built and so forth. Mm-hmm. I'm thinking that it has to be connected to something, and I'm thinking ecotourism that we can think about. Manufacturing. The other thing I would talk about is construction. And This is something that I would advise persons who are thinking about how do you capitalize on the oil and gas and the wealth and being able to get some of this wealth, is to think about certifying yourself. And the certification of yourself or certifying yourself don't necessarily mean getting a university degree or a diploma, but also getting a trade certificate. There's a lot of, when you look at, for example, the housing sector, there's a lot of jobs available for persons with trade skill in construction. There's a lot of jobs available for persons with skill in wiring houses, for maintenance of air conditioning and so forth. So there's a big pull where the construction sector is. And I think President Ali would have argued about trying to issue within at least his first term 50,000 house lots. So you're talking about 50,000 houses moving forward. Talking about the amount of money that a person with the skill set in building houses and so forth can benefit from. So you have within the next couple of years, and then even getting into the next 5 years, there's great demand for skills in construction, great demand for skills in electricity. So you don't have to get a university degree to benefit. And in terms of for like entrepreneurs, persons who are wanting to own their own business, that is something that I would advise. If you have an idea, try to act upon it, but try to formalize your business. Register with the GRE, get your TIN number, TIN certificate, get your tax compliance, register with the NIS, get your NIS certificate, register with the Small Business Bureau, see if you can apply for your local content certificate. This allows you now visibility so that in the event that you have business, government contracts and government you call these requests for services, you now become a part of that conversation. But a lot of the businesses that we have in this country, we call them informal because they're not registered. And when you're not registered, you miss the benefits of what is happening around you. So register, get formalized, get your compliance, be a part of the conversation. Local content is one of the important things that is going to allow people, especially businesses, local businesses, to benefit from the spin-off, especially from the oil and gas sector.
You touched on some very important issues indeed. As it relates to the small business registration,
right,
it is also a public policy that small businesses are guaranteed a fraction, a percentage
right
of the contracts that are awarded in the procurement process.
Right.
But of course you would need to be registered with the relevant authorities,
right,
whether it's the Small Business Bureau or the local content
right,
secretariat.
Right.
So I'm happy that you made mention of those things. We'll take a break now, and when
sure,
we come back, we will continue discussing how persons can benefit from the development
right,
that is coming to our shores.
Right, right.
Welcome back to the Development Space podcast. We're having an enriching conversation with Professor Armstrong. And as we bring this conversation to a closure, tell us a bit about what young persons or people in general could do to benefit from the massive development that is coming to our shores. In our last segment, you mentioned that they could look towards joining the transportation right, industry. You mentioned also that they could register with the relevant authorities.
Right.
And also you mentioned certifying themselves.
Right, right.
Tell us a bit more about what our nation's youth and our population could do to
right,
benefit more.
Right. So in terms of being able to benefit, I would argue that we have to pay close attention to the overarching policy of the government and where their focus is taking this country, and then see how we can connect with their overarching policy. This has to do with many bilateral agreements that Guyana has begun to explore with many countries. So one of the first things, for example, is the St. Barnabas Accord that we've recently signed with Barbados that allows the two countries to explore in a very strategic way how we can foster production, manufacturing, and exportation, especially within the CARICOM region, all with the focus of reducing our the CARICOM import bill, food import bill, which stands about $5 billion US dollars. So I think President Ali would have argued about how Guyana can position itself towards reducing that by 25% by 2025. So this means, therefore, that to reduce food import, we have to be able to provide substitutes to the import. This means that individuals who are skilled or knowledgeable in the area of agriculture, especially in non-traditional crops, cash crops, and other things in poultry, that they should spend more effort and time expanding their what they're currently doing, because these are areas where the same persons, local farmers, will have to be able to contribute to our aggregate supply. So agriculture sector and food security, position yourself there. If you're into farming, if you have land, that is something that you'd want to consider. I think there's opportunities to have small loans to help you start. And again, once you register with certain local agencies, small business bureau, and so forth, you have the opportunity to apply for grants as well as small loans to kickstart your business. And I can tell you in the next 5 years or so, persons in the agriculture sector, especially in non-traditional crops, are going to benefit significantly. Other benefits that you're gonna see coming, especially in the I should say rural area, has to be linked to our tourism sector, especially the eco-tourism. So you have these hotels, massive hotels being thrown up. They're thrown up because people want to come and explore what we have to offer. This therefore means that to visit to Kaitro Falls, to head into Letem, it means they will pass through the local economy. Local persons can anticipate or expect greater traffic in their direction. Again, you have to position yourself. You have to make the necessary investment. And this is something that we really don't talk about, investing in stocks. Young professionals, if you have some money, buy some stocks in a local company, buy some stock in one of the banks, GBTI or banks DIH. The reason being, with this growth in the oil and gas sector and the ripple effect that it will create, you'll find over the next 5 to 10 years, stock prices are holding all things equal, stock prices going up. So if you buy shares today or stocks today, you can see in the next 5 to 10 years, all goes well, the massive increase in the price. I know we don't have a solid or a very developed stock market, but there's systems being put in place to advance our stock market. So I would advise people to invest in shares. You may have a bank account which offers you about less than 1% interest. You buy some stocks, you can get more than that, about between 5 to 10%. So that is where individuals can benefit. Those are some of the things. And then you have, with these international agreements, the visa-free travel and so forth. So if you have your money, you have your finance, and with all of the opportunities are being available to Guyana, you can capitalize on that. You don't have to apply for a visa to go to the US. You might want a vacation, want to go into not the US or the UK. And so these are opportunities in which you can, if you have the resources, take advantage of it. Travel and see the world. I've been made to understand that there are some more European countries from the EU have been exploring that visa-free travel with Guyana. And these are some things that we, as persons, we need to encourage people to take vacations. See the world. The world is a big place, right? It should not be about just work and pay bills.
Certainly. Most of the opportunities that you mentioned, they can be attributed to the private sector.
Right.
But in Guyana, we have a third sector.
Right.
Where we have civil society groups, we have
right.
NGOs. Tell us a bit about how persons in those sectors can benefit from the development that has come to the nation. You mentioned some of the bilateral agreements.
Right.
You mentioned some of the diplomatic relationships that are being established.
Right.
From that standpoint, tell us how the third sector, members of that sector, could benefit as well.
Well, I wouldn't say how they can benefit, but I would argue that they have an important role to play within this development path that we're taking. And it has to do a lot with the whole idea of transparency and holding our government accountable to some of the policies that they implement, especially with the resources coming from the natural resource funds, which is where our oil money goes into. So how much money we receive, how much money we spend, where's this money spending? NGOs and civil society, they have a responsibility to ensure that the money is going to where it needs to be going. And it comes back to my study which is focused on social inequality and sustainable development. And I make the argument in my dissertation that one of the major, probably the major issue that we have to confront in this 21st century is the issue of inequality. And I'll make the argument here that many research, including Wilkinson and Pickett 2009, including Torres and Boyce 1996, and it goes on, that inequality contributes to many of the problems that we see in society. So crime, depression, suicide. Wilkinson and Pickett argue that with greater social inequality comes these problems. And the government, so this is where the civil society need to ensure that we hold our government to bridge the gap between the haves and the have-not, between the wealthy and the not so wealthy. And lastly, I'd make the argument that when you look at, again from my dissertation, when you look at the dimensions of inequality that seems to be of greatest importance in Guyana, the ones that comes out up front is the wealth. There's a significant wealth gap. So few persons have tremendous amount of wealth, whilst a whole large section of society don't have much. In my dissertation, I've actually found that from my survey, 60% of Guyanese don't own their own home. 60% from my survey. About 55% don't have a car. And certain basic assets that are necessary for functioning properly. Access to health is a big thing, very important thing, especially when we talk about the sustainable agenda. So if we don't have proper healthcare access or quality healthcare access, how are we able to function and be productive within society? So going back to the point here and connecting it to what we argued, that it's the responsibility of most of these NGOs, most of civil society, to ensure that the government spends the earnings from our resources in a way that it lifts everyone up. And one of the things that I'm dissatisfied with the way we do our public sector increases over the years, which is just give a 7% or 5% across the board, that has actually been contributing to increase in the income gap. Because if a person with a higher income gets 5%, $1 million, 5% obviously is way higher than a person with $100,000, 5%. So if we continue to do it over the years, you continue to widen the gap. What are you doing? You're setting yourself up for the many ills and problems that is associated with social inequality. We need to hold our government accountable. We need to ensure that there's transparency within how they spend the resources that they collect via tax or any other sector.
That is an excellent place to wrap our conversation for today. In closing, what would you encourage our listening audience?
I would say temper your expectations about what this oil and gas can do. A lot of people are thinking that the oil and gas sector in particular means money's just going to come to them. No, it's not going to be that. I think we definitely would have to alter the way we think and the culture behind that. Temper your expectations. Get involved. Be a part of the discourse. Be a part of the discussion. Research what the government is doing with the resources, how much they're spending, where the spending is going, and then try to qualify yourself or certify yourself so that you can be productive and you can be a part of earning some of the resources. We cannot sit idly by and think that with this booming oil and gas sector and all these finds that we're having, that the government is just going to start forking out money and giving to people. No, it's not going to work in that way. We need to be productive and responsible. I would say temper your expectations and be productive, get engaged, whether it be holding the government accountable or whether it be you yourself getting involved in the sector.
We have reached the end of this episode of the Development Space Podcast. We discussed oil and gas production and its impact on development. We have explored also key and emerging sectors. And finally, we shared tips on what you could do to benefit from the massive development that has come to our shores. Until next time, I am your host, Sydney Nelson.